12, 35 through 40. That's Luke 12, 35 through 40. If you want to turn there in your Bibles, you can do that. It'll be up on the screen here behind me. Be dressed, ready for service. Keep your lamps burning. The servants waiting for their master to return home from a wedding, like servants waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. Truly, I tell you, he will dress himself to serve. Will have them recline at the table, and will come and wait on them. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them ready, even if he comes in the middle of the night or toward daybreak. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him.
Thank you, Lee. I want you to try to remember a time in your life when you were unprepared, when you just weren't ready for whatever reasons. And you knew you weren't ready, and before long other people knew you weren't ready. That's something that I've always dreaded. And I've had this recurring nightmare, probably once or twice a year for as long as I can remember, that I'm about to get up and speak before a congregation or another group of people, and I am completely and utterly unprepared. And it is a dreadful dream, and it goes on mercilessly and endlessly, and the anxiety is so high, I just can't stand it. I'm not gifted in extemporaneous speech. In fact, that statement is in my notes. I am not gifted at extemporaneous speech. Some people are. You know, some people not only survive in situations like that, they thrive in it, they excel in it, they shine in it, and winging it is their thing. That's not my thing. And so, you know, I have this overthinking that goes on about being ready, being prepared. And it's been with me since childhood, and then that was driven even deeper into my psyche my sophomore year of college. I was taking first-year Greek with Dr. Harvey Floyd at Lipscomb University. We were still on the quarter system at that time, and so this was a 5-quarter-hour class. It met 5 days a week for an hour. First day of class, Dr. Floyd told us that he expected us to spend 3 hours a day working on our Greek, as if he didn't know all of us had full loads with other academic work that needed to be done. He said, if you want to pass this class and do well in this class, you need to spend 3 hours a day. Every night we had translation to do, translating sentences from English to Greek and then from Greek back to English. And class would begin with Dr. Floyd going to the podium, getting out the grammar book, and assigning different sentences from the exercises for that day. I had done well the first quarter. I got an A. I was really enjoying it. Midway through the second quarter, things got hectic, and I wasn't prepared. I hadn't done my work at all. But I went on to class. Dr. Floyd got there. He started assigning sentences, and he was getting down near the end. I think there were 13 or 14 or 15. Most of them had been assigned, and I thought the Lord was with me. You know, my unpreparedness would not be exposed. And then he said, Mr. Pyles, please write number 12 on the board. And I was sunk. There was nothing. I knew better than to try to wing it. That would make it worse. That would be even more humiliating. And so I mustered all the courage I could, and I said, Dr. Floyd, I'm very sorry. I don't have my work done. And the room just stopped. And my classmates looked at me with a combination of shock and pity and relief that it was me and not them that had gotten called on. And Dr. Floyd, as he often did, he took his glasses off. And he said, Mr. Pyles, I would like to speak with you after class today. And he put his glasses back on and he reassigned number 12, and the class went on. I won't go into detail about my conversation with Dr. Floyd after class, but I never, ever went back to class unprepared. And there were at least another couple of times that quarter that I didn't have my work done, but I didn't go to class. I took an absence rather than face him unprepared. I would rather deal with unexcused absences than face him like that again. And in our text this morning, Jesus is talking about being prepared, about getting ready, about being ready, and about staying ready. And he does this through three simple parables using figures that were familiar to people then, they're familiar to people now. They're relevant, they're contemporary even to this day. He talks about a wedding, and he talks about a house, and he talks about an estate. And you find, it's in verses 36 through 38 that were read for us by Derek just a moment ago, that Jesus talks about this wedding. You read different commentators and you find all kinds of different thoughts about what the wedding customs of the day were like, as if there's one overall template that had to be followed. My guess is weddings happened different ways back then, just like weddings happen different ways now. Some have said, well, the servants and the groomsmen, the friends of the bridegroom, are waiting back at the house for the groom and his new bride to return from the wedding feast. Others say, no, he's been at the wedding feast for a long time, and before he goes to claim his bride at his new in-laws' house, he goes back to spend some last moments with the friends of the bridegroom, with his servants, and that's what they're waiting for. I don't know exactly what the situation is, but it describes in this text a cultural situation that still exists, not in our culture, but in other cultures of the world, where time is elastic. Things don't happen exactly in regimental fashion according to the clock. You know, weddings these days, pictures at 5, ceremony at 6:30, a few more pictures after that, reception at 7:30, take off on your honeymoon at 9, and everybody catches their breath, you know, and starts cleaning up and doing all the other stuff that comes after all that hard work that goes into a wedding ceremony. They don't know when the bridegroom is going to come back. And so they just have to be ready. Jesus mentions in his description that it could be in the second watch of the night, could be in the third watch of the night. The Jews divided their night into 3 watches of 4 hours each, 6 to 10, 10 to 2, 2 to 6. The Romans divided their night, same 12 hours, into 4 watches of 3 hours, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, 12 to 3, and 3 to 6. And Luke's probably following this Roman system. And so he says, you know, these wedding receptions can go late. These wedding feasts can go late. And so you got to be ready. You've got to be dressed. You have to have your lamps lit. He might come sometime between 9 and midnight. He might come between midnight and 3. This is one big party that's going on for a long, long time. They had to stay ready because they didn't know when he was going to get there. In verse 39, he moves on to this second illustration of a house. Be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have allowed his house to be broken into. As is the case now, so was the case then, sadly, that houses got broken into. You remember what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount? Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. And also, as is the case now, so was the case then, that thieves didn't give you a heads up as to when they were coming. There was no advance notice. You didn't get a postcard 3 or 4 days ahead of time indicating the time of night. And so Jesus says you have to constantly be on guard. You have to be ready. You have to be prepared. And if he had known what time the thief was coming, he would have done something to prevent all of his possessions being stolen. He would have defended his property. We won't take the time, well, let's take the time quickly to read the third illustration since it was beyond the reading that we had selected. Third illustration, beginning in verse 32, the Lord said, "Who then is the faithful and sensible steward whom his master put in charge of his servants to give them their rations at their proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master finds so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will put him in charge of all of his possessions. But if that slave says in his heart, my master will be a long time in coming, and begins to beat the slaves, both men and women, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and in an hour that he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. And that slave who knew his master's will and did not get ready or act in accord with his will receive many lashes. But the one who did not know it and committed deeds worthy of a flogging will receive but few. From everyone who has been given much, much will be required. To whom has been entrusted much, of him they will ask all the more. The Roman Empire was a massive slave state. Not exactly the kind of slavery that was a part of our sad and tragic and shameful past in our own country. Not a slavery that was necessarily built around race or ethnicity, but one that was built around social class and could affect anyone of any race or ethnicity. But within the holdings of servants in an estate, one would be assigned to be the steward. He was still technically a slave or a servant, but he was put in charge of the others, put in charge of property, but he was also charged with caring for the other servants. It wasn't a self-aggrandizing position. It was a place of service. And he says it's going to be wonderful if the master comes back at this unexpected time and finds this steward taking care of everybody, making sure they get their rations of food when they're supposed to, and the estate well being taken care of. But he said it's going to be bad news if he comes back and finds this steward abusing what's been entrusted to him and abusing the people that have been placed under his charge, and simply eating and filling his own needs and getting drunk. It's going to be a sad day. And he said punishment may vary to that steward depending on his knowledge of the master's will, but it will be punishment nonetheless. So Jesus offers these three illustrations to drive home a very simple point. In verse 35, in introducing this, he says, "Be dressed in readiness and keep your lamps lit." Be dressed in readiness and keep your lamps lit. For those of you who still may be reading from a King James Version, it translates very literally here, let your loins be girded about. That's what newer translations put as be dressed in readiness or some other thing. What's this girding your loins? Well, in that day when men wore long flowing robes, if you were about to get serious about something, if you were about to work, if you were about to fight, if you were about to take off on a journey, you didn't want those things dangling along the ground. You picked up the edges and you tucked them in your belt, tucked them into the sash that might be around your robe. Modern day equivalent might be something like roll up your sleeves. If you're about to get busy, if you're about to do something really strenuous, you got to show you're prepared. You roll up your sleeves and get to it. I love how Eugene Peterson translates this in the Message. He says, keep your shirts on and keep the lights on. Keep your shirts on and keep the lights on, because you don't know when your master is coming. Now, being ready doesn't mean that we have this list of things to do, and so we check off everything on the list, and we pack our bags and we sit and wait for the Lord to get here. It's not that at all. It seems like some early Christians in Thessalonica were doing that, and so Paul has to address this issue of idleness. People had quit their jobs. They weren't able to take care of themselves or take care of their family members. They were being dependent on others to take care of them because they believe Jesus is coming back. Well, so do I. But that doesn't mean that you sit idly around waiting on Him to get here. So rather than getting it all done and waiting, it is a state of mind. It's a condition of soul and a condition of heart. It's a way of life. Not so that when He shows up, we can scramble around and try to look busy so that everything will be okay. But rather, whenever He comes, He just finds us walking in His steps, living like we're supposed to live, doing what we're supposed to do, treating one another like we're supposed to treat one another. Not flawlessly, but faithfully. Not perfectly, but in persevering fashion. And then down in verse 40, He says, you too be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect. Being ready presupposes that there's something to get ready for. There's some event that's coming later. And Jesus is calling us through this teaching to prepare for the event of all events, to prepare for the event that ends all events. He reminds us that history is going somewhere. And some people have, a simple linear view of history, that history starts here and it ends over here. And other people say, no, history is just cyclical. It repeats itself. It's just, long phase after long phase after long phase. Well, both of those are really true. Time had a beginning, history had a beginning, and it's going to have an end, and things do repeat in culture, but it kind of goes like this. You know, it's this forward-moving spiral that's going somewhere, and where it's going is the second coming of Jesus. Where it's going is the consummation of all things, the resurrection of the righteous and the wicked, the judgment, the end. And he reminds us in several places that it's going to come at a time that we don't expect. I love Matthew 24. In the first part of the chapter, Jesus is preparing them for the signs that will precede the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And he slams on the brakes, hits the shifter, changes gears, and in the latter part of the chapter starts talking about his second coming, for which there will be no signs. And near the end of that chapter, verses 37 through 39, he says, "The coming of the Son of Man will be just like in the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man." With the destruction of Jerusalem, he says, look for all these things, especially when you see the abomination of desolation being in the place where it should not stand. Luke translates that or explains that as being when you see armies surrounding the city, then head for the hills. Get out. Pray that it's not on a Sabbath day. Pray that it's not in winter. Pray that you're not nursing a small child. It's going to be difficult to leave. Things that don't make any sense at all if he's talking about the end of the world. He's talking about getting out of the city before the siege begins. But at the end of the chapter, no signs. It's going to be like the thief in the night, unannounced, no postcard, giving you a heads up. So wisdom says, since it can happen at any time, just get ready and be ready and stay ready so that whenever that comes, you will be prepared. Did you catch this in verse 37 as Derek read it for us? "Blessed are those slaves whom the master will find on the alert when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will gird himself," who? The servants? No, the master. "He will gird himself to serve and have them recline at the table and will come up and wait on them." That made no sense in that culture, much more than it makes, sense in our culture. Only Jesus as the master can make sense out of this passage. Masters didn't come home and serve their servants. But Jesus came among us as one who serves. Jesus came the first time as the one who didn't come to be served, but to serve and to lay down his life as a ransom for many. And he demonstrates that so beautifully in John chapter 13, verses 1 through 15, when he physically, literally washes his disciples' feet, challenges them to live the same way, serve the same way, love the same way. Even though he will return as Lord and Master and Christ and King, it will be for the blessing of his servants. And so 3 times in this text, he uses this term, blessed. Blessed are those whom their master finds so doing. Because when our master comes back, it's going to mean the end of sickness, the end of sadness, the end of sorrow, the end of death, the end of sin, the end of the grave. It's going to be vindication and validation of our faith. There's going to be no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. We're going to be either raised, or if we're still living, we're going to be transformed and receive these incredible, inexplicable, I don't know exactly what they're going to be like, resurrection bodies, spiritual bodies, glorious bodies that aren't affected by the things that these bodies are affected by. And so he says, if you are ready when I come, it's not a day to fear. It's not a day to dread. It's a day of joy. It's a day of excitement. It's a day of expectation. It's a day of anticipation. And Jesus says it's going to happen. As surely as I came the first time, I'm coming the second time. But you don't know exactly when. Don't know the day. Don't know the hour. So Jesus just says, get ready and stay ready. A couple of you picked up on the title of the sermon, sent me emails, and yeah, that's exactly where I got the title. Old Curtis Mayfield tune, recorded by the Impressions. He was a member of that group, released in 1965. Mayfield said about the song after he wrote it that the lyrics and the imagery in the song were drawn from his remembrances of childhood, growing up in church. And those concepts work into this song. Rolling Stone magazine named this the 24th greatest song of all time. And in their 100 greatest guitar tracks, this was number 20. And just about everybody's recorded it. Aretha Franklin, Phoebe Snow, and Ladysmith Black Mambazo. Bob Marley, Ziggy Marley, Bob Dylan. Eva Cassidy, make sure to get her in there. Eva Cassidy recorded it. Rod Stewart recorded it. The Neville Brothers recorded it. And since I was finding out everybody who recorded, I found online just a couple, for those of you guitar fans, Jeff Beck and Roger Taylor, of all people, on vocals, 2 years ago at some concert, performed this song. It was a gospel, pop, rock, soul crossover for many people. And I love the song, except this one line. You probably can't see it really well. But it's the line that says, "There ain't no room for the hopeless sinner." And there's only room for hopeless sinners, because that's all there were. And we've been over that recently. There's none righteous, no, not one. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. While we were still helpless, while we were still hopeless, Christ died for the unrighteous. He died for sinners. God demonstrates His own love for us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And so it's Jesus who calls us to be ready. And just as a reminder, in verse 40, he says, "Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect." I want you to look at verse 41 with me real quick. Peter says in response to this, "Lord, are you addressing this parable to us or to everyone else as well?" When you're talking about being ready, are you talking about us? Aren't we ready? Or are you talking to these other people, the curious and the crowds? And you may be asking the same thing this morning. Was this parable for me, Tim? Are you talking to me this morning? Was this sermon designed specifically for me? And I can tell you without hesitation, no matter who you are or what your standing with the Lord is, yes, this lesson is for you. Directly from the Lord. And if you're among those who have gotten ready, the message is stay ready. Be ready, live ready. Help other people to get ready. Leave the light on for Jesus in your life, so that regardless of when He comes back, He will find you prepared. Let Him know that you're expecting Him and will gladly welcome Him. And the message for others, if you're not ready, is get ready. Whatever it takes to get ready, however we can help you to get ready. If it's to assist you in being united with Christ in baptism this morning, that's what we want to do. If it's to help you and pray with you and struggle with you and agonize with you and cry with you as you battle sin and temptation in your life, if that's what you need to do to get ready, then we want to help you do that. Whatever your need may be, Jesus awaits you as we stand and sing.